Hi and welcome. She watched ex-husband marry his mistress until black cars arrived with a billionaire. I didn't come to ruin Daniel's wedding. I came to confirm it was finally over. The apartment keys returned. The initials scrubbed from glassware, the promises he made to me. Now engraved in someone else's ring dot at the edge of a glass pavilion on Seattle's waterfront. I stood unnoticed among orchids and money. Daniel kissed the woman who'd been my shadow for a year. Cameras flashing like a storm. The string quartet swelled and then the wind shifted. The bays, gulls scattered, and a procession of black cars slid up the drive. Doors opened in choreography. A man stepped out, tall, gray at the temples. Flanked by quiet men in darker suits. People started whispering, "That's Evan Harrow." The harbor was legend that afternoon, sunlight glazing. The water ferries, scissoring foam. A cluster of tourists photographing the newlyweds through the fence. As if catching a rare, bright fish. Inside, everything was curated. The chairs were dyed gray. The florals an expensive argument against winter, the cake. A chandelier of sugar shards. I had promised Priya I wouldn't drink. But I took a flute of champagne anyway and kept to the perimeter. Maya. She murmured, touching my elbow. "We leave after the first dance, okay?" We witnessed it. "That's enough." "I'm fine," I lied on the was. Daniel adjusted his cuff links as if they were steering a yacht. Only he could see. Handsome? Yes, handsome had been the problem. Handsome gave him rooms, exemptions, and a gravitational pull. I mistook for destiny at 25. And mistook for marriage at 30. Beside him stood Alina Park. Now Mrs. Rock. Her hair tamed into a glossy, practical knot. Lips the blue-red of a brand's exact pan. She scanned the room like a woman who understood optics. Because she did. Public relations had been her specialization long before she specialized in my husband's affection. "Look at them," Pri said. "They're matching cheekbones with the photographer. I used to match his toothbrush." I said, and hated how sharp my voice came out. I steadied it. Then we stopped sleeping. Then we started sleeping apart. Then we divided the furniture like a state line. "He's a mistake. Behind you." Priya whispered, "Not a monument. Ahead." The quartet slid into something classical and sugary. The couple began their first dance, and I watched. As if observing a weather pattern I could predict but not control. I had written a speech for this moment months ago. The one where I would confront them both, humiliate Daniel with all the late-night truths, turn the room into a jury and plead my case. Divorce law doesn't allow for juries, and weddings aren't courts. I burned the speech. Instead, I held my glass and remembered the last morning in the condo. The smell of coffee cooling the hallway beyond our bedroom. A tunnel of things unsaid. He'd kissed my forehead like a brother and told me I was resilient. People say that when they prefer your survival to their guilt. The string lights trembled above. US when the doors opened. It was subtle at first. Valet radios chirping in an unplanned cadence. The hum of new engines. Black SUVs lined up like a sentence nearing its verb. Uniformed staff exchanged the quick salmon. Bright glance of people who sense a tip about to grow. Is the mayor coming? Priya asked. No, said a man near us. A board member from one of the city's foundations. Better the king of logistics. Himself. The name traveled faster than eyes. Could Evan Harrow? The private billionaire who'd made shipping software elegant and moving boxes a religion. He stepped out, flanked by two men whose posture suggested they were trained to read rooms as topographical maps. Elevations of risk, valleys of secrets. Evan wore a charcoal suit, tailored without vanity, the kind of simplicity that commands a room by refusing to ask for it. He didn't scan. He measured. His gaze passed over me like a beam. Skimming a field, pausing nowhere, then returning. Alina stiffened. Daniel's smile faltered by half a tooth. "What is this?" Priya breathed, suddenly more interested than protective. "This," I murmured, "is drama." Evan's presence cleaved the pavilion into before and after. He didn't head to the dis. Didn't offer congratulations. He spoke to the event planner, then the hotel manager, and then, smiling politely, to a graying man I knew from the city's development commission. Furthermore, he was careful not to make a show. Furthermore, he was an expert at the soft invasion. Within a minute, new faces appeared. 2 women in navy sheath dresses carrying tablets. A younger man with rolled-up sleeves and a pen behind one ear. Legal team in the invisibleness of perfect tailoring. People whispered about mergers. Audits. A surprise gift for the couple. The kind of spectacle money uses to flirt with power. Daniel made the first move. He broke from the dance floor mid-spin and shook Evan's hand with a grin too wide to be honest. Alina followed, composing herself into a PR smile. The photographer floated over like a dragonfly. Evan ignored the lens. The quartet kept playing. A staffer brushed past me, murmuring, "Excuse me," as if we were rearrangeable chairs. Priya squeezed my arm. "We should go now." But something in me, maybe pride, maybe the stubborn muscle of a life with Daniel that hadn't fully atrophied, made me stay. Wanted to see what future had marched into the wedding, wearing bespoke shoes. Evan glanced our way again. This time his gaze stuck. He didn't smile. He simply nodded once, as if a decision had been confirmed. "What was that?" Priya said. "I have no idea." I said I had, of course. Every idea, because the week before a thin cream envelope had arrived at my walk-up in Capitol Hill. No return address. Only my name inside. A non-disclosure agreement I hadn't signed 2 years before, and a note written in a brisk, angled hand. "I believe you know the parts." They forgot to hide each. The black cars hadn't just come to bless a marriage. They'd come to collect a debt no one knew I held. We were not a tragedy. Daniel and I, we were an equation that looked solvable until the numbers refused to behave. Our first apartment was on East Lake, with a sliver view of Lake Union if you pressed your face against the kitchen window and leaned left. We lived on dumplings and ambition, taking the 70 bus to downtown. Jobs that felt like invitations to future selves. He wore shirts 1 size too tight because his ego liked to hug. I wore flats and learned to walk faster than men expected. It was our private sport, outmaneuvering expectations. He'd studied urban planning, but wasn't interested in designing parks. He wanted to finance them. Furthermore, he could talk about alleys like they were arteries and zoning like destiny. Furthermore, he found his way to Northline Developments, a company with the appetite of a shark and the smile of a dentist. I found my way to Harbor Link, the non-profit trying to keep working families in neighborhoods they'd built with their hands and lost with their rent. At first, our dinner conversations were sparring, disguised as flirtation. "They're not villains," he'd say, twirling his fork. "Northline brings jobs and a tidal wave of rent and glass towers that reflect each other. But not the people below," I'd counter. He'd grin, kiss the back of my hand. "You are incandescent when you argue, and you are charming when you justify." "I can be both," he'd say. "Charm doesn't absolve me. It accelerates." We married after 5 years because we wanted to, and stayed married for 3 more because momentum is a kind of wanting. I was good at my job. Grant writing wasn't romantic. But language is a tool, and money listens to language. He was excellent at his . He could make a spreadsheet sound like a poem and a hostile takeover feel like civic duty. Our fault line wasn't love. It was secrecy. The hushed conversations in the hallway. I pretended not to hear. His phone turned face down one time too many. The way he started using we to mean his firm. Not us. He met Elena at a press conference about the Northline proposal to revitalize a neighborhood south of the stadiums. A cluster of auto shops and family groceries, and churches that hosted potlucks the size of weddings. Elena polished narratives for a living. She was hired To sell the word revitalized to people whose homes it endangered. I'm not stupid. I told Priya the first time I saw a text from Alina on his phone. Happy to prep you for Q and at tomorrow. Coffee. Of course you're not stupid, she said, but the world is rewards the bold even when they're wrong and the loyal only when it's convenient. I asked Daniel directly. He laughed in that way men do when they pretend a woman is being adorable. Maya. She's a consultant. She signs her text with a winking emoji. I said, so do you? I stopped at 30. He kissed my forehead. Don't be threatened. I'm not threatened, I said and heard thunder somewhere inside my rib cage. The end began not with a night in a hotel, but with a spreadsheet. I'd gone into his office to find tape. A file was on the printer. Warm in that guilty way. Paper can be schedules of acquisition, a timeline for relocations, a column labeled community subsidy, with numbers that had been reduced in pencil. Why are you reading my work? He asked from the doorway. Why are you erasing rent support? I asked back. We need flexibility. People need leases. He reached for the paper. I didn't let go. We stared at each other, the taut line between our hands. A metaphor we were too tired to name. I'm doing what I'm paid to do, he said. And I'm doing what we promised to care about, I said. Somewhere between your goals and my grant reports is the city we said we wanted to live in. He softened Maya. Please. It would have been a lovely time to cry. I didn't. I slid the paper back into his hand. What else? I asked. He paused. The pause was confession. When he moved out months later, he took his ski gear and his bonsai and left behind a houseplant that had survived 3 winters and a marriage. He texted me a week after. I'm sorry. I stared at the words. Those 2 blunt stones, and put them in my pocket. I kept walking. Furthermore, I didn't know about the NDA. Until much later. I didn't know that someone else had trimmed the subsidy numbers beyond Daniel's pencil, and I didn't know that the quiet trimming would slice open an investigation with a billionaire's name on the folder. Evan Harrow was a public rumor and a private man. He owned a company that made moving things elegant, routing trucks like chess pieces across a continent, optimizing last-mile deliveries with patience that felt like obsession. He rarely appeared on magazine covers, the ones he did. Grace called him the quiet disruptor or the man who reinvented a map. People said he returned fan mail if the letter made him curious. People also said he had a memory so precise he could recall an address from a conference name tag 5 years prior and send a handwritten thank you note. To the intern who'd fetched him coffee. It was the kind of backstory money writes for itself, softening its edges with charm. His note to me had been printed on thick paper. The envelope smelled like cedar. I believe you know the parts they forgot to hide. At the wedding he approached us after he finished, shaking hands with men who held buildings in portfolios, the way kings held land up close. His green eyes were not warm exactly, but they weren't cold. They were interested, which in powerful men is sometimes the only warmth you get. Miss Soulless, he said. Priya blinked. You know her. I make it my business to know people who know cities, he said. Miss Solace, I've wanted to speak with you about my ex-husband's choice of venue. I asked. His mouth twitched about a file. He slipped a card into my hand as if we were in a spy film and not under a chandelier of dais. I'm sorry, this is invasive, he said, nodding toward the room. The day, but timing matters, and today a certain group of stakeholders is present that is very difficult to gather in one place. You mean capture? I said. He inclined his head. I mean gather. What do you want? Priya asked, stepping to my side with the ferocity of a small, elegant storm. Evan addressed me. A conversation, he said. I have reason to believe Ms. Park and Mr. Rock have been working with others on a project that misallocates designated funds. I need someone who understands where those funds were meant to go. I need someone who won't lie to me. And you decided that was the ex-wife. I said reliable by heartbreak. I decided it was the grant writer who cared about commas and consequences. He said someone who reads the footnotes most men skip. Priya's eyes flashed. She liked him now, which meant I didn't. Why me? I asked. He didn't blink. Because you're here. Is that how fate works? Doomsday or salvation? Passing out business cards because the right person chose the wrong party. Alina appeared, then the bride, the rival, the woman who had become a person to me, only when I realized she would occupy the seat I once held. Her dress was a sculpture. Her eyes were a battlefield. She looked at Evan with recognition. That wasn't pleasure. Evan, she said, you weren't expected. I prefer it that way. He said, congratulations. Thank you, she said. Voice professionally warm. What brings you business? He said, on my wedding day. On your wedding day, he said evenly. And before you whisper to security, I assure you I have an invitation. He lifted someone else's copper-foiled name card between two fingers and then let it flutter back to the table. I also have a witness if we need one. He added, angling his head toward me. Not unkind. Alina tracked the motion, and for the first time her gaze landed on me. Something like shame. No, like recognition, softer face. Maya, she said. And it was a greeting and an apology in 2 syllables. Mrs. Rock, I said. Daniel arrived. Talking before he reached us. This is not how either of you want to do this, he said. Smiling, the practice smile of a man who manages donors. Evan. We can schedule a meeting Tuesday. Schedule away. Evan said. In the meantime, I'll be in the study across the hall. Miss Solace. 5 minutes. It wasn't a question, don't. Daniel said. It's a circus. Maybe. I like circuses, I said, and walked toward the hallway because no one had ever invited me to a circus where my truth sold the tickets. The study smelled like wood polish and old money. Through the beveled windows, Elliott Bay was blue and hostile. Evan closed the door softly. Thank you. What do you have? I asked. He didn't sit. He placed a slim folder on the desk and opened it to a page I recognized, with the strange intimacy of seeing your handwriting in a stranger's hands. An early draft of my grant proposal for the Harbor Link Rent Stabilization Fund. Lines I had cut were lightly visible beneath the printed text, the spectral remains of what words do when they fail. Where did you get this? A friend at the commission? He said, Miss Soulless, I'll be direct. Northline funneled funds earmarked for bridge housing to a shell contractor, who billed for units never built. Paperwork says otherwise. Paperwork is persuasive, but someone modified your language to create a loophole. Then leverage that to reclassify the subsidy. I can show a pattern across 3 projects. And you want me to be the angry ex-wife? I said, you want me to ignite the narrative. Want you to correct the record, he said. And I want you to tell me if Daniel did this. I pictured the pencil in his hand. I pictured the column labeled community subsidy and the way the numbers had leaned toward 2 zeros instead of 3. He trimmed. I said he didn't cut. And the cuts? I hesitated. I don't know, I said. And if I did, I would not tell you. In a room that smells like power on a day that smells like pastry. A smile flicked through his eyes and died. Good, he said. You're not reckless. Everyone keeps being surprised by that. I'm not surprised, he said. I'm hopeful. He slid the folder toward me. Take it, he said. If you change your mind, my number is on the card. If you don't, I'll proceed without you. Proceed how? Quietly. Then loudly, he said. That's the only tempo that works. I picked up the folder. It felt heavier than paper. What's in it for you? I asked. No one asked that first, he said. I'm not first. I'm acquiring a significant stake in North Line, he said. I like the bones. Not the tumors. Cleaning matters before a purchase. Also, he added almost as an afterthought, my sister lived in a motel for 6 months when a different developer revitalized her block. There's a ledger I keep that money can't balance. This helps their. It was a motive shaped like grief. He opened the door. 5 minutes are up, he said. I'll see myself out. He left the way he came, soft. Inevitable. When I returned to the pavilion, the cake had been cut. Daniel lifted a piece to Alina's mouth while keeping his gaze on the room's interpretation of him. Pri. Why, it touched my wrist. What did he want? Not revenge, I said. An audit. Same outfit. Different stitching. Outside the black cars waited engines. Patient. I put the folder in my tote and felt for the first time in months something besides loss. Possibility. Complicated and sharp. In the days after the wedding, Seattle went back to normal, which is to say it rained. Rain is perfect for decisions. It makes everything sound like thinking. My Capitol Hill walk-up was a box of plants and books and the kind of furniture you can move alone. If you convince yourself. It's a test of character. I spread Evan's folder on the small dining table and made a pot of tea. I didn't drink. The documents breathed secrets. There were invoices from the shell contractor, Orion. Adaptive Solutions. A name only a spreadsheet could love. There were emails printed without headers. Redacted names like wounds, stitched with black thread. Dates circling the window. When Daniel and I had stopped touching, I called Priya. Tell me not to do this. You'll do it anyway, she said. Because you're you. The trick is making it yours and not theirs. Who's all of them? Evan, Daniel, the city men who print their reasons on textured paper. I've decided to meet Evan. I said. Of course you have, she said. Wear the blazer that says I know where the bodies are. But I am also kind to dogs. I don't have that blazer, you do? She said it's navy. Before the meeting I went to see Dr. Kesha Vaughn, the therapist. I'd paid to hear me excavate the ruins of a marriage and then plant something where the crater was. You're brightened today, she said, adjusting her glasses. That terrifies me. Because brightened is your prelude to volunteering for pain. It's not pain, I said. It's civic duty. Your civic duty finally includes self-protection. I'm working on it. I told her about the wedding. The folder, the note. She listened the way doctors listen to test results. Not unemotional but steady. Why would you do this? She asked finally. Because the past took my voice, I said, and the present is handing it back on cards. Stock C.K. Evans card. She said yes. What do you want from him? Nothing. I said everything. Permission to believe that the story of Daniel and me can include a chapter where I do not simply endure. Be precise. She said, endurance is worthy, but it's not the only noble verb. Testify. I said, expose, correct, choose. She smiled. Good. And I want terms. I added, if Evan wants me, he gets conditions. What kind? Protection for families displaced, a fund, real numbers. A ban on Orion Adaptive Solutions from any public contract. A seat at the oversight table. She nodded. Negotiate like you're worth it. I am, I said. And shocked myself by believing it for a full 3 seconds. The meeting was in a room with too much air, and an espresso machine that made sounds like confession. Evan arrived precisely on time, his assistant trailing him with the soft gravity of competence. You read the files, he said, not asking. I did. And you're right. Mostly Orion invoiced for 24 units at the Elm Crescent site. The city inspection records show 14. The shortfall was reclassified as temporary pause, which preserved eligibility for Further funds. Names redacted. I said conveniently, but you know their shape. Yes. He leaned back. What do you want, Miss Salas terms? I said and told him. He listened without interruption when I finished. He steepled his fingers like a man who had evolved at a boardroom table. Agreed on the fund. He said, I'll seat it. Oversight. Yes, Orion Band. If we can push it through procurement. You can push anything through procurement, I said. You petrify bureaucracy by looking at it. He almost laughed. Appreciate hyperbole when aimed in my direction. There's one more thing, I said. I won't be the angry ex-wife. I won't be your headline. My work stands on its own. No cutaways. To my face while the city wrings its hands. You assume I control the cameras. You control everything that tries to control you. I said, that's your brand. My brand is privacy. Then make mine dignity. I said. He nodded. Once done, he slid a non-disclosure agreement across the table. Not to silence me, but to protect the investigation. I read every word. He watched me read like it was a sacrament that strangely felt like respect. When I finished, I signed. He did too, with a pen that could probably buy a used car. Miss Soulless. He said, I'll need you to walk me through Harbor Link's original proposal language. The loophole is in the prepositions, of course. It is, I said. The devil can't resist a good for. His assistant smiled. Evan didn't? There's another thing. He said. Ms. Park asked to speak with you. I blinked. Alina, yes. She sent a message through a mutual acquaintance. Private meeting. Neutral ground. Why, she didn't say, he said. But I imagine she's aware that the wind is changing, or she's the wind, I said. He stood. You're right to be cautious. He said, you're also right to be curious on both. I said, that's my brand. We met 2 days later at a coffee shop in the Chinatown International District where windows fog with steam and conversations blur into comfort. Alina arrived wearing a coat that could have been armor. She took it off and became smaller, which is how armor tells the truth. Maya, she said. Alina. I said, I don't know how to start a conversation where I'm the villain. She said, maybe by admitting you're not sure. If you're not, I said. Her lips curved fair. We sat. The barista set down cups we hadn't ordered correctly and got anyway. I didn't set out to take your husband, she said. But I didn't stop once he wanted to be taken. Agency is a beautiful word until it ruins someone's life. I said, and yet we keep using it. She said, this isn't about Daniel. Not directly. Orion is bigger than I knew. The reclassification of the subsidies. It's a trick that predates us. I filed reports. They were edited by whom? She stirred her coffee like a person who needed a job for her hands. A man named Pierce Latimer. She said. Consultant with Elastic Ethics. He used to work in procurement. He knows where the doors are. And he knows how to wedge them open. And Daniel, complicit by convenience. She said he liked solutions that presented themselves at cocktail parties. The clarity hurt more than the betrayal. It's easier to fight a monster than a shrug. Why talk to me? I asked. Because you're the only person in this mess who doesn't seem to want anything I can't live with. She said. Also because I'm pregnant. She added, almost laughing at her own audacity. And I would like the world my kid is born into to be marginally less bleak. My stomach dropped, as if the floor had opened. Congratulations, I said. A word that felt both generous and foreign. I don't want a story where I'm saved by motherhood. She said, I want a story where I do the right thing because I can read a balance sheet and a conscience at the same time. Then show up. I said, testify, sign. She nodded. I will. We sat in silence outside the rain. Auditioned for permanence inside the future. Rehearsed too. The first rule of exposing something large is that you won't sleep. The second is that you will be tempted every Hour to go back to bed and pretend. You never learned to read. Evan's team built a timeline so elegant it felt like betrayal too. Beauty. Every invoice that smelled wrong. Every email whose tone slipped from professional to panicked. Every document where a preposition did the work of a wire transfer. They mapped it like a city. Arteries of fraud feeding neighborhoods of complicity. I brought Harbor Link's language line by line. Evan laid out a plan. Independent audits. A community oversight council with actual teeth. Metrics that measured more than profit. Someone protested about shareholder value. Evan said, shareholders live in the world too. After in the hall, he said, are you okay? I'm not used to being listened to by men who sign checks. I said, get used to it. He said, you sign them now too. In a way. I tilted my head. Are you trying to recruit me, Mr. Harrell? I am trying to keep you, he said straight-faced. Harbor Link does good work. But systems change from both sides. Pick a side or pick both. I thought of my apartment's plant leaning toward the window. Thought of my mother who cleaned houses while humming boleros and taught me that survival is a choreography. Both, I said eventually. On one condition, terms again. Always. I said. The Eviction Prevention Fund gets a public dashboard. No numbers and shadows. Agreed. We worked. The months crawled and sprinted. I learned to chair meetings without apologizing in my head. I learned to say no without a paragraph of context. Furthermore, I learned that power is not always a predator. Sometimes it's a tool heavy and blunt. And yours, to lift. Daniel called once more to apologize. With fewer excuses, I met him on a bench by the water where we used to eat fish tacos on paydays. He looked older, which was a relief. I loved you. He said, I don't know how to say that without sounding like I'm trying to buy absolution. Say it by not asking for absolution. I said you. Say it by loving your kid better than you loved yourself. His eyes widened just enough. She told you she didn't need my permission, I said. Neither do you. I want to be better, he said. Then be better. I said, no one is stopping you. He nodded, which was both too little, and all one can do in a park on a cloudy day. Later, Alina and I sat on her stoop eating popsicles meant for children. We were not friends. We were something else, co-authors of a chapter that didn't have a name. Yet sometimes I think the villain in my life is momentum. She said I get caught in a current, and by the time I think to swim, I've passed 3 bad decisions. We can build a pier. I said, something to grab. She laughed. You make civic metaphors sound cozy. It's a talent. She grew quiet. Do you think you'll forgive him? I think I'll forgive myself first. I said. Then the world. He'll be somewhere in the line. Fair. She said, the baby kicks when I drink orange juice. Good taste. I said. We watch the street absorb evening. Somewhere down the block a neighbor practiced piano with earnest mistakes. It was the sound of getting better. Romance is not a requirement for redemption, but it's a language we forget to speak to ourselves. I avoided Evans' invitations to dinner 3 times. The 4th time I said yes. Not because I was ready, but because my refusal had begun to feel like superstition. We met at a restaurant tucked behind a bookstore near Pioneer Square. The menu was the kind that asked you to trust it. Evan looked less armored. He'd left his jacket somewhere on purpose. This isn't work, he said, which is the first sentence men say when they need you to know they respect your boundaries. What is it? I asked. Curiosity, he said. And gratitude? You're very good at gratitude. I said. I think that's how you built your empire. Compliments are my forklifts. He said deadpan. We talked about books. A safer thing than feelings. He liked essays that complicated his life. I liked novels that freed mine. We talked about sisters and mothers. He told me about the motel. How his sister's boy had drawn houses on napkins with windows like eyes. He did not cry. Furthermore, he let the air thicken and then thin again. That too felt like respect when he drove me home. He walked me to the building's door and stopped like there was a line painted on the sidewalk. "May I kiss you?" he asked. "No," I said, and watched relief flicker across his face. "Good," he said. "We're not there. Maybe we never will be," I said. "Also good," he said. "As long as we are somewhere. Somewhere is a place you can live. We did. He became a person I called when the world made a sound I didn't recognize. I became a person who didn't apologize for asking for what I needed. Once in a meeting, a man interrupted me to explain my own data back to me with the pained patience of someone lifting a couch. Evan interrupted him in return, not with fury but with a quiet, "Let her finish." The man flushed the color of bad wine. I finished. It felt like teaching a room to breathe. Priya watched the not quite thing between us with a grin that mixed mischief and warning. "You never owed yourself a romance with a rich man," she said, "but you do owe yourself relationships that feel like oxygen, not fog." "Put that on a pillow," I said. "Pillows keep us alive." She said, "Don't mock them." On a Saturday in late spring, Evan joined me at a Harbor Link community event. Face painting and job fair tables and a ballot initiative. Sign up. Goose bumping in the wind. He stood in the back like a bodyguard to my hope. Kids ate snow cones in colors invented by marketers. A woman named Dora pulled me aside and told me she'd gotten onto the rent relief list because we changed the forms from English. Only it's a small thing. She said. It's not, I said, and went home and cried in the kitchen where the plant had begun to thrive in a new pot. Later that night, on my fire escape, we sat with our knees touching and the sound of the city thudding like a distant drum. I used to think power was a language I'd never learn. I said. And now he asked. "I think it's a dialect." I said. "You can acquire it if you listen with the right part of yourself." "Which part is that?" "The part that remembers you are not the only mouth that needs feeding." I said. He nodded. "You keep me ethical. I keep you accurate." I said. He smiled. "Same word in my dictionary." We did not kiss the sky, did not oblige with a comet. We blinkered paper cups of corner store sparkling water and looked at the ferries, gliding like secrets. No good deed goes unpunished. My mother liked to say. She also liked to add, "But it survives." 2 seasons after the hearings, a new proposal reached the commission. A waterfront expansion with the kind of numbers that make men sit forward. Evan's company had a stake. A big one. He'd inherited it through the acquisition. The plan promised jobs and parks. It also promised alignments that made me itch. A routing of traffic that would litter a low-income neighborhood with noise and exhaust. We did the hard work, a North Line executive said in a meeting. "Now we reap." "Farmers don't poison their fields to save time," I said. "No one's poisoning anything," he replied. "It's the waterfront. Water travels." I said. Evan watched me. He'd known this was coming. He hadn't warned me. "This will pass," the exec said, "with or without your blessing." Without my silence. I said. I drafted a letter co-signed by the Oversight Council, by Harbor Link, by pastors and PTA, presidents, and a barista, who had more influence than any of the above. We argued for a redesign that respected air. We proposed a route that saved 9 minutes and a neighborhood. Evan called me that night. "You could have brought it to me first," he said. Tone neutral. "I did," I said, "in the form of a draft you chose not to read last week." Silence. "I'm sorry." He said. "I was pulled by money." I said. "By momentum." He corrected, and we both hated the sentence. "Don't be the man who thinks momentum is a god." I said. "I won't," he said. "Let me fix it." "You don't get to fix it alone," I said. "You get to be one of us while we fix it." He exhaled the sound like a train-breaking deal. The plan changed, not because he was benevolent, but because we were stubborn. The city approved a version that let kids sleep through the Night, the exec left to spend time with family, a euphemism. That might have been true for once. Later Evan stood with me on the same waterfront where I'd watched my ex-husband marry his mistress. "You nearly lost me," I said. "I know," he said. "Don't make me the thing that keeps you good. You aren't." He said, "You are the thing that keeps me honest. Those are synonyms in my dictionary." I said. He laughed. He was very handsome when he laughed. Which was annoying. Walk, he asked. We did. The city glimmered. The ferries glided. The black cars were somewhere else. Fine, another day's drama to its location. I felt strong and ordinary and rewarded by neither. And both. Redemption is disrespectful of deadlines. It arrives late. It lingers. It refuses to be the last paragraph. But stories need endings. Especially ones that will be read aloud on the internet by kind. Voices over stock music and a montage of the bay. 2 years after the wedding. I stood outside the glass pavilion again. Not for a ceremony, but for a fundraiser for the very fund we'd built with our stubbornness. Families mingled with donors. Kids chased each other. An elderly man asked for a second plate of the good chicken. Daniel was there, looking softer in a way that suggested he'd finally exhaled. He brought photos of a small, fierce girl who had his chin and Alina's concentration. Alina smiled at me across the room with that specific, weary generosity of new mothers and reformed spin doctors. We weren't friends. We were something kinder. Witnesses. Evan arrived without spectacle. He never returned to the wedding script. He had learned that surprise is only romantic in movies. Furthermore, he stood at the back for a minute watching. Then he joined the rest of us. Which is what redemption looks like when you can afford it and choose to anyway. He handed me a check for the fund. "With conditions," he said, teasing, of course. I replied, "Transparency, community, sign off me as co-signer." "Done," he said, and tucked his hands in his pockets like a boy with nothing to prove. We talked about nothing and everything. The way people do who have decided not to rush the chapter where their hands find each other. Maybe that chapter was coming. Maybe it had already come in a language that didn't require lips. Priya took the stage. For the brief remarks. She told a joke about Grant cycles and human cycles and made the room soften at the edges. I spoke after briefly about commas and consequences. The hits. The fans demand them, I thanked. The people whose rent got paid and the people who wrote the checks and the people whose names go on plaques and the ones who never show up for photos. When the evening sagged into conversation, Daniel approached. "Thank you," he said, "for what I asked for. Not making my worst choices the only story anyone gets to tell about me," he said. "I didn't do that." I said, "You did. You kept showing up." He nodded. We shook hands like citizens after. On the deck facing the water, the air pulled at my hair and the city pretended it wasn't tired. Evan joined me. Shoulder to shoulder. Like a good sentence keeps its clauses. Do you ever think about that day? He asked. The wedding. I sometimes said I wonder who I would have become if the cars hadn't come. You would have become yourself. He said, just slower maybe. I said that maybe I needed the choreography. He looked at me. I came for other reasons. You know, I didn't know you'd be there. I know. I said, but I was, and you noticed. That's one of your rarest skills. What? Noticing the right person at the wrong time, I said. And deciding to be patient. We fell into silence. That wasn't empty. The fairy horn sounded. Far off, someone's child laughed. A gull plotted theft, Maya, he said finally. Yes, if someday you want more, he said awkward. In a way that pleased me. I'm here. I know. I said, if someday I want less, will you be here too? Yes, he said. Especially then we didn't kiss. The world didn't end. The black cars left this story long ago. The rest was walking and working and making choices in rooms with and without chandeliers. I went home to my plants and my books in a city that no longer felt like a chessboard. someone else was playing on. On my way upstairs, I stopped to help an elderly neighbor carry her groceries. She told me about her grandson's science project and asked if I knew how to keep basil alive. Barely, I said. And we laughed. In the apartment, I put the event's name tag on the fridge. The magnet was a cheap souvenir shaped like a fairy. It held, "If this story found you." If you've ever stood at the edge of a room watching a past you loved marry a future you didn't choose, know this: endings aren't verdicts. They're doors. Myers wasn't about a billionaire or black cars. It was about choosing accuracy over anger, dignity over spectacle, and the slow, relentless work of building a life that fits. If those choices moved, you do the simple thing that helps stories like this reach the next person who needs them. Like the video, so the algorithm remembers, shares it with a friend who could use a reminder that power can be negotiated. And subscribe so you don't miss the next story, where messy people pick better verbs. Drop your thoughts below. Tell us your favorite line, the character you argued with, the moment you felt seen. Your voice is part of this too. Thanks for being a part of our channel and community.